My name is Dennis Sheeran.
And this is Raymond Steinmetz.
And we are from the Instant Relevance Podcast. We are proud members of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to right now. Make sure you check out all of the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1...
Coming up on episode 134 of the House of EdTech podcast, I've got an EdTech thought to give you encouragement for your journey, and I've got a great recommendation with a super simple, super useful grading app. We've got the House of EdTech VIP, and we're going to talk with Stephanie Howell about her Google Innovator Academy experience. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. Welcome back to another episode of the House of EdTech podcast. Thank you for making this show part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. I am so excited that you're here. Let's get into this episode. Quick announcement. We've got the Education Podcast Network ISTE meetup, and that is again coming up on Sunday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. at Pat's King of Steaks in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Join myself and many other podcasters from the Education Podcast Network and listeners from all over the world as we ascend on Philadelphia for ISTE and cheesesteak. So join us for some hashtag cheesesteakpd. You don't need to RSVP, although if you're going to plan on coming on Sunday the 23rd, please tweet about it. Use hashtag ISTE19. You tag the Education Podcast Network at edupodnet. Use hashtag cheesesteakpd. Tag me. Tag your favorite podcaster. See if they're going to go. And as I've mentioned in a couple of places, if you are wearing a House of EdTech t-shirt, then I will buy your cheesesteak. Or if you're wearing a Podcast PD t-shirt, or if you're wearing Education Podcast Network gear. So there you go. Hope to see you on Sunday, June 23rd. Also here at the top of the show, I want to promote something that has sort of gone to the back burner, but I am going to be bringing it back as I record this. The House of EdTech 60-Sec Rec is a short 60-second or so podcast that I do that I produce as a skill on Amazon Alexa devices. Now, the reason I spell it is because if I say it, mine's going to start talking to me, and yours might start talking to you. So, therefore, I spell it. But if you want to make the House of EdTech 60-Sec Rec part of your daily briefings on an Amazon digital assistant device, let's say, go to chrisnessie.com/Alexa and do that on your computer or your mobile device, and you can add it to your daily briefings. If you want to get this as a standalone additional podcast, you can do that if you become an awesome supporter of the House of EdTech, and I will talk about becoming an awesome supporter at the end of the episode. I just had those couple of announcements here at the top of the episode, so now let's take a look at the EdTech thought. For this episode's EdTech thought, I have titled it, Stay Strong. If you haven't figured it out yet, the way education works is far from perfect. You can do everything right and still something can go wrong. Education is filled with doors that close while new ones open. Every time the bell rings or the school buses arrive, you have a new opportunity to make an impact on your students. You have a new opportunity to work on that relationship with a colleague that isn't quite right. Sometimes you can move from plan A to plan Z and none of them will work, but you continue to develop new plans and new strategies. You can say and do what's best for students and teachers, and if the wrong eyes are on you, it won't be appreciated, but you must continue your mission. Sometimes in education, like life, you might purchase a ticket to go and plan a trip to Italy, but when you get off the plane, you see signs that say, "Welcome to Denmark." You could pitch a fit and scream and yell and say every curse word under the sun. Or you can stay strong and enjoy being welcomed to Denmark. You might not be where you want to be or doing what you want to do, but there is beauty in everything if you take a moment to look around. Your course may have recently changed on the journey you're on, but it's going to be okay. And you're also going to be okay. Stay strong. And now it's time for the featured content for this episode, and I am really excited to be sharing a conversation with you that I recently had with Stephanie Howell. We talked all about her recent Google Innovator Academy trip to Australia, and she shares some great nuggets, some great wisdom, and she talks all about her project. And hey, enough out of me. Let's throw it to me, and then we'll hear from Stephanie. So here we go. Let's roll that interview. All right, ladies and gentlemen, through the power of Squadcast.fm, I am joined by Stephanie Howell. Stephanie has a master's in curriculum and instruction and educational leadership, and she is currently a middle school instructional technology coordinator for Pickerington Schools in Ohio. She's previously taught 5th grade as a special education teacher and has also worked as a one-to-one aide. She enjoys working with teachers and students to increase the effective use of technology, and she's spoken at a number of conferences, but most recently, she became a Google for Education Certified Innovator and got to go to Australia as a part of that journey. Welcome to the House of Ed Tech, Stephanie Howell.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I cannot wait to share about the amazing innovator experience that I went to Sydney, Australia for, and just can't wait to talk about education and technology and how it's changed my life and my students' life and my teachers' lives. So I'm just very excited to be on this podcast.
And again, I am very excited to have you. Let's dig right in and let's start with, before you can become a certified innovator, at some point in the past, and this is my history part of the show, Google came into your life. So, Stephanie, when did Google enter the picture for you in terms of your role as an educator? Tell us the beginning.
So I first found out I wanted to be an educator in 2006. So I was a sophomore in high school. Before that, I did not want to do anything with education. I hated school. I thought it was so boring. I really just did not like it. So I was thinking more of business or something along those lines, and education was nothing I even thought of. And then in gym class, these students that were in the MD classroom, so they had multiple disabilities, they came down to our classroom and I became really good friends with them and started asking their teacher, how can I help more? So during my study hall, I would go to their classroom, and some of the students, particularly the one that got me into education, his name's Chucky, and he was nonverbal. So the way that he had to communicate was using technology. He also had to point or make different noises. And so by the end of my high school career, me and Chucky, I really just understood him because of the way that he would communicate. And then I went to college for special education, and I thought I would do that my entire career, and that did not happen. In 2014, I got a job as an inclusion teacher. So I was with students with learning disabilities. A lot of my students had dyslexia. They had different, we had autistic. We had a lot of different disabilities in that classroom. And I did not use technology at first. We only had a couple devices when I first started. And so over Christmas break, things just weren't clicking and I wasn't engaging my students. And I was really struggling with that fact. So over Christmas break, I got onto Pinterest, found this thing called Google Classroom, and I began to set it up. Had no idea what I was doing. I mean, this was back in 2014. I think Google Classroom maybe just came out. I just used it once a week to start. And I think that's where you have to start so you're not overwhelmed with all of the technology because there's so much out there now. Back in 2014, there wasn't a whole lot. And so it was just a lot of substitution at first. So I took my writing class. So I had a group of students that came to me every Friday to work on their writing goals that were in their IEP. And they hated coming to me before Google Classroom. And then after Christmas break, every Friday, they knew the routine. It probably took maybe 2 weeks. They would get on Google Classroom and they had a choice. So they could pick between 3 different writing prompts. And then they were able to use Google Docs to start typing their response. They could also use dictation if they needed that. And I saw a change in my students. Before they had paper and pencil and they had to write. And after introducing technology to them, the excitement on their face, and they would ask me Monday through Thursday, can we use Google Classroom today? They were just so excited for it. And I think that's where my mindset changed. Again, in 2014, we didn't have that many devices. Luckily for Spec Ed, they provided that to our department. And the director, his name is Brian Seymour. He is fantastic. And his vision for technology is amazing. So that next year, we got iPad carts for every team. So we had to share those with 3 teachers. And then the following year, we went 1-to-1. And so that is kind of my story about why technology is so important to me. I've just really seen it impact students with disabilities in a positive way.
Absolutely. I mean, we're starting to see that more in mainstream media and how, we're portraying people with learning disabilities. But I'm curious. So you start with Google Classroom, and when Google Classroom was brand new, if we compare it to what we have now in 2019, the first edition of Google Classroom stunk.
Yeah.
they've since made a lot of improvements. And you mentioned Google Docs. At some point, though, what made you think Google is so powerful, and whether it's Docs or slides, what are some other ways that you started to integrate Google into the instruction? And I like what you said about engaging your students. You've recognized that. So how did you further engage them?
I think I went to Google because of the collaboration piece. Students were able to share their Google Doc with me, and I could be in their document, not even sitting right next to them, giving them different comments off to the side and just telling them, hey, look at this, or relook at this, or put on your headphones and listen to your work. And so it was that feedback piece that my students were getting from me. They could also share with a pair. So another student in our class, and they could share that writing piece with that student and get feedback from other students in our class. We did a lot of debate. So we kind of did one, a silent debate. So no talking, it was just writing. And the students just loved interacting that way. A lot of my students were shy and they didn't have confidence because typically students with disabilities, they feel like they failed, or they're not as smart, or they don't have that confidence. So my students that were shy were able to ask me questions in a Google Doc, or rather than face-to-face.
You mentioned this silent debate. It sounds like an interesting concept, and I think it would work in any classroom where maybe you don't want it to get too rowdy or too loud. What does that look like? Can you give us some more details about that?
Yeah, so I just put a topic up. So like, should cell phones be used in the classroom? And then students decide what side they're going to be on. And then from there, there's no talking. And they just go back and forth. And they kind of just, it's like a chat room. And multiple students are just going back and forth about their sides. And then they're listening, or they're seeing the feedback. And then they're providing more feedback to each other.
That's very cool. I may try that before the end of the year here with some of my larger classes. That sounds cool.
Yeah, the kids love
and
it.
Quiet.
Yeah, it's kind of like tricking them. Like, okay, I need a quiet day, and this is the way we're going to do it.
Now, so you're moving on. Let's say it's 2015, 2016. I've often wrestled with the Google level 1 and level 2 and certifications. I don't have any of that. But what obviously you have to go through that to get to where you now are. Mm-hmm. What made you say, I need to take my Google-ness to the next level?
So my current boss, his name is Brian Seymour. I mentioned him earlier. When we went 1-to-1, he pushed every teacher to get Google level 1 certified. So you had to go through the modules, and then you had to take the tests. It was okay if you didn't pass the tests, but you had to take it. So that was part of our contract in, I think it was like 2016. And so that's kind of what introduced me to the level 1 and level 2 certification. And then I just kind of got addicted to earning badges. My department kind of makes fun of me because I have so many badges.
So you're the badge lady?
Yeah, I'm the badge lady. I collect all the badges, but I just love learning, and I love learning in a self-paced manner. And all of the badges are set up self-paced, so you can do it on your own time. You can watch videos, some of them, or you can read articles. It just depends on the different courses. And so I just love learning that way. So I have a ton of badges. So I did the level 1. Passed it, and then I asked him if he would pay for the level 2, and he said he would. So then I took my level 2, and then I got it. And so I just had to renew those because I think it's 3 years, you have to renew them. So that was 3 years ago. So I just renewed them this year.
All right. Can we get to the fun stuff now?
Yes.
So now you're a Google Certified Innovator. You had the opportunity, as I mentioned in the intro, you got to travel to the Google Innovator Academy in Australia. So first, what made you decide to go for Innovator, and walk the listener through what that process was like, what you had to create? And I mean, the floor is yours, and I'm just going to try and stay out of your way.
So I first heard about the Innovator, I think it was on the Google Teacher Tribe podcast with Casey Bell and Matt Miller.
I'm a little familiar with that.
Yeah. So I heard them talking about it, and then I kind of was like, well, what is this about, when I first started looking into it. And it looked very interesting. The application process is a little extreme for what they're looking for. The video I thought was probably the hardest because you only have, they cut it down. So you had like 1 minute and 30 seconds. So now when I applied, it was only 1 minute. And so figuring out how you're going to introduce yourself to Google in 1 minute can be really challenging. And then I just said, well, let's just try it. If I don't get in, I don't get in. But at least I tried. So I applied for it. They did change, I think, the application. I applied last year and I did not get in. And so they changed the application process a little bit, like the question format kind of changed. And it just asked, like, how many people follow you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and because they wanted to know your impact, I think, on education. And then they just asked about your background and any awards you have won or anything like that. And then you get into the design thinking process. And I have never gone through the design thinking process before. I don't know if a whole lot of educators have, but if you haven't, it is something that you should look into. And so then they start talking about your project. So for the Innovator Academy, you have to have a project, no solution, which is really hard for me because I'm a fixer. If I have a problem, I like to think of solutions for that problem rather than holding off a couple weeks and waiting into the Google Innovator Academy to actually start beginning to solve that problem. So it's a mindset. It's very challenging. And so my project is, how might we raise the knowledge level for students with disabilities? Because a lot of my teachers, when I taught, a lot of those students are learning at a DOK level 1. Teachers are trying to get those students to memorize facts at that recall level. And we need to push students to use their strengths, because a lot of students with disabilities have a lot of strengths with like debates and those type of things, especially your dyslexic students. And so that's kind of my problem in education. And that is kind of my goal to solve it. And so you create a video explaining your problem in education. And for me, that's hard to do in a minute because I'm so passionate about just students with disabilities, because I truly believe if we can find a solution for those students with disabilities, it will help all students. I mean, just like the garage door open, that was built for someone with a disability, and yet everybody benefits from that. So that's kind of my philosophy with like education. If we can find the fix for students with disabilities, we're probably able to figure it out for everybody else.
If we had more people taking that approach, we would have far less problems.
Yeah. And so then after the video, you have to wait to find out if you have been accepted. I think it's like a month, but it's a pretty quick turnaround speed, I thought, for how many applications I'm sure they have received. And I found out it was like a Tuesday morning. Of course, since it was Australia, all the individuals that applied from Australia and New Zealand already knew while I was sleeping. And I woke up and they have a Google Hangout chat going on. And they put all of the innovators in it, and you get like the chat was, I think it had over like 300 messages by the time I got up. And I'm like, what is going on? I checked my email, and like that day I remember waking up early for some reason. Like normally I wake up at 4:45, but for that morning I woke up at 4, and I'm just like scrolling like, what is going on? And then I felt like I couldn't tell anybody because I was like, I have to ask my boss before I can post on social, to make sure I can go. And so it was a really exciting message that morning.
I can only imagine, but that's got to be up there with like Ed McMahon knocking on your door with the big check.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, when you decided to apply for this, obviously Google does these at many different world locations. Did you apply specifically for Australia, or did you have other options? Because obviously Google has places all over the world. Was Australia particularly appealing to you?
So they do have different locations, and you have to apply for that location. My kind of thinking was apply for the Australia one, but my goal was to get in the New York one. So I was like, I'll apply for Sydney, Australia, and London. And if I don't get in, it's okay, but I really want to get into that New York Innovator Academy. And so once I was like, I'm not turning it down if I get it, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and the networking and all the friends that you meet throughout the process is not replaceable. There's so many connections I made just in those 3 days that I will have for a lifetime. And then the bigger community outside of our cohort. I mean, I've already met so many other innovators that are a part of this community, and they seem like I've known them forever too. These friends that I've just made, and all the advice and support that they've given me has been really nice to have.
Now, for those who are listening who might be curious, you did mention that before you went public with it and wanted to just like scream from the mountaintops, you had to talk to your district and your superiors. How did that conversation go? And was there any resistance, or was it just like, all right, see you when you get back?
For my district's amazing. We won ISTE's Distinguished District last year, and my boss, Brian Seymour, he is just fantastic. He really supports my department and our teachers in that professional learning. So he is very supportive about training, sending us to trainings. Like we're going to ISTE. I know a lot of other school districts don't have that support. And when I actually got to the Innovator Academy, talking with other innovators, they don't have the same support. Like one person that I went with, her district didn't really support it. And so hearing that, like, I think we so often lose sight of our perspective of how our school districts run, and going out there. I mean, I wrote him a thank you note when I got back, because his support, if I didn't have that, I don't know if I would have been able to go, or I would have had to use personal time, where he is letting me take this project and really run with it next school year. Where some people, that's a barrier. And they have to figure out how to fix that barrier, where that barrier was already kind of gone because of his leadership and support that he has on our district.
Now, based on that, was it something that, did you ask or mention, hey, I'm going to apply, or I have applied, or did you just let them know when you got accepted?
I just let them know when I got accepted.
There you go. Take a chance.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to take a chance. If he says no, then that's okay. And then he had to go to our superintendent and talk to and our superintendent's fantastic too. Very open. They want continuous growth. We have an innovation conference. We bring in a big speaker every single year. And it's a day where teachers are excited to learn. We're really changing the professional development in our district. Before it was a lot of sit and get. And since his leadership, it's a lot more hands-on. And teachers are excited for professional development. I mean, before his leadership, we probably had majority of our teachers taken a lot of absent days during professional development. And now you rarely see them take a day off on professional development days, which is amazing.
No, that's super important. Obviously, you want your teachers to A, want to come to work, and then B, want to continue to grow and get better at what we do. Now, something that I'm curious about, I don't know if my listeners are, but is this something that you had to pay for out of pocket to travel to Australia, or does Google pay you or compensate you for coming there? How does that all work?
So you have to pay for travel and the hotel. Once you are there, Google pays for food. There is a kitchen, probably 500 to 1,000 feet from another kitchen. There's food everywhere, so you will not go hungry. Once you are at Google, the food is delicious, and they do provide all the meals for you, but you do have to provide your way for travel and a hotel. Okay.
So, I mean, that's not so bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of people did like GoFundMe's and that kind of stuff. So I know a lot of people that I went with, theirs got funded for them to go.
How long were you there for?
I was in Sydney for a week. The academy was 3 days, and then they do an Energizer, which is after you become an innovator, you can go to Energizers. So there's one like at ISTE, there'll be one at New York. Whenever there's an innovator academy, there's always an Energizer, and that's for any innovator to come and connect and get professional development. So I went to that optional Energizer day, and it was fun because we got to meet other individuals that went through the Innovator Academy maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and hear about how it's impacted them.
So if I understand you, these Energizers are any former innovator can come and get involved and meet the new ones and just kind of continue to grow the network. Yeah.
And they were like, some of them came to our graduation and supported us that way. So it was really cool. Just the connection that was there.
Now, one other piece of this, and this is a big piece before I let you go, you arrive at Google, their Sydney campus. What are you thinking? What happens? Give us a little overview of what the actual 3 days is about. And what do you feel as you walk in the door?
So the first day we were all some of us that got the same hotel, we went together walking over to Google. 'Cause in Sydney, you can pretty much walk anywhere. And so we walked to Google, everybody is so excited. And then with the time change, you're exhausted at the same time trying to adjust. And we got to Google, they made us wait in the lobby until exactly 9:00. They all come down, and it was just exciting. And then they took us up to the room. Once we got to the room, we had breakfast, and we got to see one of the kitchens at Google. We got to kind of eat together, and we were just talking. And it's really cool to hear at Google, like everybody's so passionate about their project, and you could really see that. So just talking to people like, what's your project? They were just so excited. Conversations were easy to have. They weren't awkward because we had the Google Hangout chat. So I felt like we knew people before even arriving. It was just putting a voice with their writing. And then we had a couple hangout calls. They put us with teams. So you have a team for the 3 days and you really get to know your team. Google sent us a breakout box before attending the academy, and you only have one clue and you had to work with the other innovators to try to break out. So that was a little frustrating for the competitive ones in our group, which is me. But we all created a Google slide and you're just learning to work together. And then you begin to go through the design process. So you're really focused on that user. And my mindset, completely changed. Usually I'm focused on, okay, what needs done? But you really had to go back. And my user was a student that I had. Her name's Bella. And I had to go back to, how did Bella feel? How did she think? What solution would Bella want? Not what I would want, but Bella. And so everybody is focused on their user. You're getting feedback that's in a positive way. I know sometimes you get feedback from others and you just feel like disappointed because you have this great idea. But at Google, it has that yes and attitude. So yes, and try this. It's not the no, but, that kind of attitude. And just the culture at Google made you want to open up. I don't know what they do, but the culture at Google was just so positive. Everybody's ideas, suggestions mattered. They even told us it's okay to give your worst idea ever. And I think sometimes we forget that in education just because of how fast-paced we're moving and how fast-paced we want to change education. And then after the first part of the design process, we then moved into prototyping. And so then we began to, you had 8 different choices that we did during one of our sprints. And you had to list out the best ideas, worst ideas, any idea you had was okay. And then you shared that with another person in the academy and you got feedback from them. Based on that, then you had to prototype that one idea that you're going to try. And so then people were creating apps, people were creating websites, people were designing, like one of my friends, he's going to make a makerspace for students with disabilities to help with those skills. And so he was designing this classroom for that time. And then after you design, you get more feedback. And I think so often too in education, we forget that feedback piece and that reflection piece because we're just so busy. But that feedback piece and that reflection piece is so meaningful. And to have that time and see it modeled at Google really changed my perspective for next year with my teachers. And how am I going to add that piece into our professional development? How am I going to add that into my project? How am I going to add that into what I'm expecting of them? And then from there, after the prototyping, you then go on and you kind of pitch your project to somebody. And then you talk about what are the steps now that I'm going to need? And so after the academy, we're going to be set up with a mentor. We're still waiting to hear who our mentors are. But you look through this whole large database of other innovators that have offered to be mentors, and they're going to hopefully match you with someone that aligns with your project. So for a whole year, you're going to have a mentor to support you, along with the people in the academy. Because by the end, it wasn't my project. It was everybody in that academy's project. They're all there to support you, be with you. And I think it was just the connection of networking with others and knowing I'm not in this alone, or my school district is so focused on this, but in Australia, they had no idea what Webb's depth of knowledge was, which I thought was really interesting because in America, we focus so highly on that, but they're more focused, on Hattie's work and that kind of stuff because Hattie's from Australia. So hearing their perspectives on different learning theories was really interesting to help me with my project.
I think one of the most awesome things you just shared about the experience was so much about the culture at Google and how they approach things, through design thinking and yes, and I thought it was really great. And I think it's going to be great that you're going to bring some of that back in addition to your project, which is phenomenal to help, the students with disabilities, but to also shape and change and make an even bigger impact by changing the culture and how you approach your day-to-day job. I think that's really special and fantastic.
Yeah, it was definitely the culture of Google that made this experience worthwhile. Usually after professional development, a lot of people, including myself, you feel overwhelmed and exhausted just with all the knowledge you felt, but leaving a day at Google, you felt energized. It was like the weirdest feeling I ever felt. Like last year when I went to ISTE, I was exhausted and overwhelmed just because of all of the knowledge that was thrown at me. But at Google, I just felt ready to continue to learn for the next 2 days. And normally I would have been like, okay, this was a lot. I need a brain break. We were there from 9 until like 8 o'clock at night. And that's a long day for any conference of learning. And you, like the entire day, you just kept learning. And I was hardly ever on my computer because I was like, okay, my computer is going to die. I need to take the converter to make sure it charges. My computer never died because you were just that engaged in the conversations that you were having and in the presenters that were presenting. And they just, it's a science that I think Google has mastered that I hope to learn. But they did energizers to just kind of get you to connect more with people, get to know them. And then you would just, again, go back into the hard thinking of that design process. You begin feeling like you failed just with some of the feedback, or you just felt like, oh, their project's so much better. And then there would be like a motivational speaker that would bring you back up. Like they just knew what you needed, which was really interesting. But so often I think we don't think about what teachers need. And we really do need to restructure our professional development to help them and help them grow.
You're preaching to the choir about changing PD. You mentioned that your project, it wasn't just your project, it became like everybody's project. From your perspective, what one other project did you become really interested in or fascinated with that somebody else brought to Sydney?
So I feel like my entire team, we worked really closely with 6 other innovators at our academy, and Kyle, we became really good friends even after the academy. He's in the United States. So there was 9 other individuals from the United States, which was really exciting. And we kind of really clicked together, especially because of going to conferences and being able to see them again. Like, I don't know how often I'll be able to go to Sydney, Australia again. But I will be able to see all, the Americans. Like, we're already talking about meeting up at ISTE. And a couple of us are going to be on the global scavenger hunt together. So everybody needs to watch out because we were ready. But Kyle's project, he's creating a space that has a makerspace for students with disabilities. And last year, my project was creating makerspaces kind of for our media centers. And since I have that spec ed background, really connecting with him and saying, this is what we did. Did you think about adding this in? Because there's other school districts that might have already done some of the work and making his load easier because of what I've already done in the past or some of the ideas we've implemented. So we really connected. And then there's another individual, she's from New Zealand, and she's creating this website for younger students. And I told her, I said, if you charge this, I want it for free because of all the feedback our group has given you. But her website is really cool. It's going to be created like for younger students and to apply those digital skills for them. And then there was another one that was from Australia, and she's working on changing professional development and making it more personalized. So if you're an entry level and you don't know anything about this topic, this is where you're going to start. If you're intermediate, this is where you're going to start. If you're advanced, you're going to start here. And so we went the personalized professional development last year route. And so we were able to share with her, like, this is what our district did. And she was able to use some of those ideas to make hers stronger. So it was just a really cool atmosphere. You're hearing from different people from all over the world. I mean, there was no one else from Ohio that went with me. So it was people from all over the world, like a lot of people from Texas. We had people from California, Tennessee, and then you had your New Zealand and We had a couple of Canadians, and just hearing their perspective on education and what their district's doing and how Australia doesn't have as many policies as America does in their education, and having them understand the barriers that we're facing compared to what they're facing was really just eye-opening to me.
Obviously, if somebody listens to this interview a couple of times, they'll be able to, take notes and come up with reasons why they should become a Google Certified Innovator and pursue it to this level. But let's say they only listen to this once. What's the Cliff Notes version from your perspective? Why should somebody consider pursuing this?
Someone should definitely apply for the Google Innovator Academy just to go through the professional development that Google offers. I felt like a Google employee for 3 days, and it was amazing. They treat you so well. And then just the people that you meet. The relationship piece that I met from the Google Innovator Academy is not replaceable. The relationships that I've met over the 3 days was incredible, and it will impact for the rest of my life, just because of going through that academy with those individuals.
So Stephanie, thank you for a great conversation and giving us a peek inside, your Google experience and how you got to where you are. I only ask so many questions, but I'm sure a lot of people have more questions. What's the best ways that people can get in contact with you to ask you questions and learn more with you?
I'm addicted to Twitter. I am always on Twitter, so that is probably the best way to reach me. So my Twitter is Mrs. Howell134, and I like to share different things that my students are doing and my teachers are doing. So it's a good place if you want to learn more, or if you have any questions, don't feel to reach out and message me.
Nice. Stephanie, thank you so much for being a part of this episode of the podcast. I really appreciate you taking time.
All right. Thank you.
Before I get to this episode's EdTech recommendation, just have to say, once again, thank you to Stephanie for taking time to be on the show. And if you've considered becoming a Google Certified Innovator, wherever you are in your Google certification journey, reach out to somebody like Stephanie, who is doing some great things with the teachers she works with that's ultimately benefiting her students. And, be sure to go and check out the link in the show notes. I will have a link to her project that she's doing as a Google Innovator and how you can get involved. And that's going to be out at chrisnessy.com/134. Now, the recommendation. I want to recommend Groovy Grader. Do you need some peace and love and happiness in your classroom? If so, you need Groovy Grader. Groovy Grader is an app designed to replace your old school paper grading calculator. Groovy Grader provides more flexibility, convenience, and ease than other popular slide graders. It can be configured to work for hundreds of questions and has the option to display the grade as a whole number or with one decimal place. Groovy Grader can show the number correct, the number wrong, or both. Groovy Grader was designed with usability as a top priority. Unlike some competing apps, Groovy Grader can view 50 or more grades on the screen at once. It also allows you to turn off the auto-dimming screen. There's no touching to scroll for most common grades, or to turn the screen back on. Groovy Grader, again, is optimized for iOS 12, and it works great on iPhones, iPods, and also iPads. I will include a link to this in the show notes for Groovy Grader out at chrisnessy.com/134. And once I found it, I have been enjoying it on the iPad, and hey, it has made my grading a heck of a lot easier, because I was using a website where I had to constantly click on the bookmark, and this just made my life easier. So I'm using Groovy Grader. You should check it out too. And that is this episode's EdTech recommendation. I am really excited to have another installment of the Just Give It a Try segment. This is a relatively new segment, and if you're new to the podcast, every episode I end it by saying that using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try. And I started this segment to encourage a listener like you to share your Just Give It a Try story. Whether you had success or you failed, I want to know what you've tried and either, again, had success with, or maybe it didn't go quite as you planned in your classroom, and I want to share your story here on the podcast. I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and Jamie is going to let us know what she tried.
Hi, Chris, and everybody over at the House of EdTech podcast. My name is Jamie Halsey. I teach 4th grade in Roseville, California, and today I am sharing with you something new I tried. This year at parent conference time, I decided to create an infographic for each student to take home with them after the conference. On the infographic, I included pertinent information that I wanted to deliver to the parents, such as scores on their math tests. I broke down their language arts grade into different categories so the parents could see how they were doing in all of the different areas of language arts. I included reading habits such as the number of books read, the number of genres tried, and their reading level. I also included strengths and areas where students could focus on to improve in school. And then finally, to personalize it, I added a picture of the student right in the middle of the infographic, along with a QR code which linked to a Flipgrid. And on the Flipgrid, the student talked about their reading goals for the year. The feedback I got from parents was really positive. They really liked having all the information on one sheet, and then they were able to take that sheet home and put it on the refrigerator, have discussions about their child's progress, and celebrate those successes. If you're interested in that infographic, you can follow me on Twitter at Mrs. Jamie Halsey, all one word, and at the top of my feed is a picture of the infographic along with a link down below. The link also, I could provide that for you, is goo.gl/NCPT for capital M, and that will take you directly to the infographic, and then you will be able to make a copy of it and edit it for yourself if you want to use it. So I hope you're all having a great day, and happy teaching. Bye.
Jamie, thank you so much for sharing a phenomenal idea. This might be the best idea that I've heard in a very long time in terms of education. How cool is it making an infographic about each of your students and giving that to parents as a summary and, getting kids involved and QR codes. It's just so dynamic, and I hadn't seen this done. So when I saw Jamie talking about this on Twitter, I reached out and I encouraged her, please share your story for this segment. So Jamie, thank you so much. I will include a link to Jamie's Twitter in the show notes at chrisnessy.com/134. And again, she is on Twitter and she is at Mrs. Jamie Halsey, and that's MRSJamieHalsey. And I'll also include a link in the show notes directly to the template to make your own infographic. And if you want to have your story featured on the podcast, just go to chrisnessy.com/flipgrid and choose the Just Give It a Try grid and share something that you tried in education, and I will share it here on the podcast. And now it's time for this episode's House of EdTech VIP. Congratulations to Mr. Kyle Kesselring. Kyle is a 5th grade teacher from Ohio. Big Ohio theme here today on the podcast. He is an English language arts teacher, and he has also taught social studies. You can follow his blog and his educational journey at mrksworld.com, and that's MRKSWORLD.com. And he is also on Twitter at DileyTeacher, and that's DILEYTEACHER. Congratulations, Kyle. You are a House of EdTech VIP. Thanks for checking out episode 134 of the House of EdTech podcast. Thank you specifically and specially to Stephanie Howell for sharing all of your Google Innovator Academy experience, and also to Jamie Halsey for sharing in today's Just Give It a Try segment. I look forward to bringing you more great conversations through the summer. The next episode is going to come out just before ISTE, and the train doesn't stop here on the House of Ed Tech. Now, if you want to keep the conversation going, that's what I ask you to do every episode. So if you want to share your thoughts on everything that I shared here, or even one specific thing, just go out to chrisnessy.com/134 and you can leave a comment on the show notes. If you want to reach out in other forms, go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. If you enjoy the House of Ed Tech, first thing you can do first and foremost, tell somebody else about the podcast. Go into your faculty room, go into the lunchroom, heck, tell somebody on the bus if you ride the bus to work. I don't know. Share the podcast on social media using the hashtag House of Ed Tech. It's also on Instagram at House of Ed Tech and also the Twitter under the same name. The other thing you can do is you could also become an awesome supporter of the podcast. My awesome supporters make the podcast go from a financial standpoint, to be honest. So special thanks to my patrons, because this is all powered by patreon.com. Thank you to Anthony Arnault from the New Teacher podcast at newteacher.org. Eric Kurtz from Control-Alt-Achieve. Find him at controlaltachieve.com. Dan Gallagher from gallaghertech.edublogs.org. Carlos Garza, Mr. G from the Aced Tech podcast. Find it at aced.tech. Peggy George from Classroom 2.0 Live. Jen Giffen from Shooks and Giff, the podcast. You can find that great show out at bit.ly/ShookesandGiff. Jeff Herb from InstructionalTechTalk.com. Mike Messner at TeacherMike72 on Twitter. JP Presevento, host of the phenomenal Bits and Bytes of Education podcast. Find that over at jpprez.com. Lynn Smargis at Lynn Smargis on Twitter. Scott Titmus at SD Titmus on Twitter. And Kyle Wilcox at Level Up EdTech on Twitter. Thank you to all of you for all your support. And if you're interested in becoming the next awesome supporter, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the podcast will be episode 135, and that's going to come right to you on June 16th, 2019. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And if you want more of me in your life, also subscribe to Podcast PD. Then we can pretty much talk every week. Until next time, thanks for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try.